time, people get confused about the difference between a phrase and a clause. I welcome you to another edition of Fix English with Topsy. In this lesson, we're going to consider the topic, a phrase and a clause. What is the difference between a phrase and a clause? Phrases and clauses are the building blocks of every sentence. A phrase and a clause are building blocks of every sentence. Phrases and clauses help to improve our communication and writing skills. This lesson will help to clear the air about the confusion that sets in when you need to differentiate between a phrase and a clause. Are we good? Let's get started. What then is a phrase? A phrase is a word group without a subject and a finite verb, while a clause is a word group with a subject and a finite verb. In a phrase, we do not see a subject and a finite verb. If there is going to be any form of verb at all in a phrase, it's going to be a non-finite form of verb. On the other hand, every clause must have a verb. Every clause must have an active verb. Watch my video on finite verb for more clarification. Now, let's begin with phrases. Phrases can only form parts of sentences. Phrases can form parts of sentences. Let's consider the example below. The man in the garden has been working without losing strength. In this sentence example, we'll see that we can derive as many phrases as possible. Phrases cannot stand on their own. We can only derive them from sentences. So let's see the phrases that can be derived from this sentence given. The man. The man is a phrase here. Why? There is no verb of any kind. The man. Another example here is in the garden. There is no form of verb in this example given. It can be regarded as a prepositional phrase, of course. Another example here is has been working. Has been working is a group of verbs that can be regarded as a verb phrase. A verb phrase. So when we have a group of verbs working together as one to achieve only one purpose, so we regard it as a verb phrase. Another one that we can see here is without losing strength. Without losing strength. Without losing strength is another example of a phrase that we regard as a prepositional phrase. There is no verb in it, so it's a prepositional kind of phrase. Each of these phrases forms part of the sentence, does not have a finite verb, and performs different functions. Let's see more examples of phrases. All the citizens of this country. All the citizens of this country. During rainy season. During rainy season. Before the first seller. Before the first seller. Wearing a yellow dress. Now, these are examples of phrases that are available in this video. Now you can find out more examples on your own. Just make some sentences and try to derive some phrases from them, and you get to see that there is no confusion at all about identifying a phrase. Now let's move on to clauses. A clause, on the other hand, can stand alone, particularly when it is independent clause. An independent clause is also known as a main clause. A main clause can stand on its own in every sentence. As a matter of fact, it is also regarded as a simple sentence. However, it cannot stand alone when it is dependent. So we have two types of clauses. We have the independent clause and the dependent clause. The dependent clause is also known as a subordinate clause. It's also regarded as a subordinate clause. Now, we see that the simple sentence can be regarded as an independent clause in the example below. The man left the principal's office in annoyance. The man left the principal's office in annoyance. Our father promised to sponsor her to the university. My teacher told us the history of Africa. These three examples are independent clauses. Why? They can stand on their own without having to depend on any other form of expression. However, if we have to consider the dependent clauses, even though they have the subjects and their verbs, they can't stand on their own except they have the main clause to guide them. Now, let's see examples of these dependent clauses. Before I came in, how he handled it. After the contestants arrived, as soon as the spectators departed. If we consider each of these examples given, we'll realize that for every one given, there is a subject and a verb. Before I came in, for instance, we have the subject I after the subordinator before, then we have the verb came. Then for the next example, how he handled it. After the subordinator how, there is the subject he and then the verb handled. So that makes it a clause. For the next example, we have after the contestants arrived. The last example there is as soon as the spectators departed. As soon as is the subordinator, the spectators is the subject, departed is the verb. So all these examples given here are dependent clauses. So we see that they need main clauses for them to sustain themselves. For them to be more meaningful, they need the independent clauses. Now let's consider more examples to actually differentiate between a phrase and a clause. Let's see this first example. His attitude irritated me. What he did to me irritated me. What's the difference between these two? The first one, his attitude. His attitude there is a phrase serving as subject of the sentence there. That is a phrase without a subject and a verb. So it's the phrase itself serves as the subject of irritated. Now, the second example, what he did to me, replaces the attitude. Now, what he did to me. He is the subject, did is the verb. So that makes it a clause. However, it is a dependent clause. What irritated me, what he did to me. So that makes it a clause. So let's see another example to differentiate between a phrase and a clause. I don't understand the teacher's method of explanation. I don't understand how the teacher explained. What can you spot as the difference between the two? The teacher's method of explanation is a phrase. Why? There is no verb in that expression, the teacher's method of explanation. Of course, it forms part of the entire sentence. While in the other example, how he explained, we see an introduction of the subordinator and then he, the subject, and then explained, the verb. So there must always be a verb in every clause. That is what makes it different from a phrase. Let's consider another example. All the patients in the ward were discharged after the doctor's arrival. All the patients in the ward were discharged when the doctor arrived. So let's see the difference between these two. The first one, after the doctor's arrival. Do you notice any verb in that expression? No. Arrival there is just a nominalization. Then we have the second example, when the doctor arrived. After the subordinator when, we have the subject, the doctor, and then arrived, the verb. So that makes it a clause. So we then begin to determine the type of clause each of these is. So I want you to always remember that an easy way to identify The difference between a phrase and a clause is to pay attention to every individual word in every expression. Once you can identify that this expression has a finite verb in it, then it is a clause. But where there is no finite verb, it is a phrase. We have come to the end of this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. See you in my next video.